Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Claire Noble, and I am with the Vail Symposium located in beautiful Vail, Colorado, one of North America's premier outdoor recreation destinations. First, I want to check in. At the bottom of the screen, you should see a number of options, and one of those is Q&A, and that's how you're going to communicate with us this evening. In the Q&A, you can ask questions and direct comments at tonight's speaker. And so what I'd like everybody to do is open up the Q&A box right now and type in one word that describes your dreams that you're having right now. While everyone's doing that, I just want to make a few other points about some of our program notes this evening. This evening's program will last from 6 until 7 p.m. and Q&A is how you're going to communicate with us. If you're having technical problems, please use the chat box for the technical problems, and questions and comments go into the question and comment box, the question and answer box rather. I would like to also thank our sponsors for this evening's program. They are the Town of Vail, Vail Resorts Epic Promise, the Vail Daily, and the Antlers at Vail. I'd also like to thank the generous Frechette Family Foundation, as well as the underwriters for the summer season. That is Cindy Ingalls and Leela and Walt Misher. And I'd also like to thank Kathy and Neil Kimmel, who've underwritten the Hot Topics series. Our next program comes up on May 14th. That's a Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. And we welcome Rohit Bhargava for that program. He's a marketing and innovation expert. He is the CEO for the Non-Obvious Company. He is a Wall Street Journal 6-time best-selling author. And so he'll be talking about being a non-obvious thinker, curating trends, and in particular about the trends that are accelerating right now in the time of COVID-19. Well, dreams can entertain us. They can be used for problem solving. They can be used for inspiration. But there are also nightmares that can terrorize us. And so this evening, to help us figure out what's going on inside our head, we are really honored to have Dr. Deirdre Leigh Barrett with us. She's the past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. She's the past president of the American Psychological Association's Division 30, the Society for Psychological Hypnosis. She's the author of 4 books, including The Committee of Sleep. She's also an editor of 4 additional books, and she's the editor-in-chief of the journal Dreaming, the Journal of the Association of the Study of Dreams. She's appeared on numerous news programs, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, PBS, and the Discovery Channel. And she's frequently quoted in print, including the New York Times. And she teaches classes on dreaming at Harvard University. So Deirdre, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I just want to tell you some of the things that people are saying. They're saying they've had odd dreams. They've had family dreams. Dale Moser says he's had some healthy dreams. Nina Cummings is saying her dreams have been somewhat disquieting. Jamie says they're typical. Kathleen says they're kind of freaky. Somebody else says they're kind of exciting. So those are some of the dreams people are experiencing right now.
Okay, well, those are some of the kinds of dreams I'm going to talk about. I'm actually not going to talk about flying dreams or nudity unless I get that in the Q&A. I didn't write the title. I'm also going to minimize myself and start sharing some imagery. Basically, I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes each time in 3 parts. And the first part will be about dreams and problem solving in general. Then I'm going to talk about trauma and dreams across lots of events. And finally, I'm going to talk about dreams about the COVID-19 pandemic. And after each of those sections, I'll do a long Q&A, and I'll come back on screen for the Q&A. But Basically, I believe that dreams are thinking in a different biochemical state, and that much of our dream content is obviously our personal issues, childhood slights, current moods, how we get along with others. But almost everybody else's research is focused on those things. Most of the dream books you read are about those things. So I've become very interested in how dreams sometimes address our objective, even professional issues. So I want to tell you a little bit about that, because I think what we learn from looking at how they do that tells us something about how they do the personal ones too. That just, what are my slides doing? Okay. Okay, that's the slide I want. Sorry about that. So because dreams are so visual, art gets the most help from dreams. And anthropologists actually think that some of the more surreal cave paintings are very likely to be depictions of dreams. But certainly since recorded history, artists have painted their dreams. William Blake painted a number of dreams. Salvador Dali and the Surrealists very explicitly advocated looking to dreams as an inspiration for their work. Leonora Carrington painted hers, as did Remedios Varo. And even I make art from my dreams. This is one of my digital art pieces based on a dream where I was walking down to Harvard Square in the middle of the night, passing some of the landmark buildings, and I began to see little creatures up on the roofs at first. And I thought, oh my goodness, they've lived here all these years and I only noticed them now. So I'm walking down the street looking at the creatures on the roofs, and then after a little while, they're down in the street with me. And I think, oh yeah, they must only come down in the middle of the night, and I've never been in Harvard Square in the middle of the night. I think in my dream, I'm in Harvard Square in the middle of the night all the time. So then I walk around among them. And anyway, I woke up, and because the Harvard Lampoon building is one of the already more remarkable ones, I represented the creatures around the Harvard Lampoon. And not all dream art looks especially stereotypically dreamy. Jasper John's career took off after he dreamed of painting a gigantic but quite realistic American flag. Literature also receives help from dreams. Mary Shelley dreamed the two key scenes of Frankenstein. And Robert Louis Stevenson did the same with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And music is not an area that most people experience in their dreams. In fact, we don't hear very much in our dreams at all. But musicians are much likelier both to have sound in general and to have music. And Paul McCartney dreamed the Beatles' all-time greatest hit, Yesterday. And Billy Joel says that he dreams all of his music. Inventions that have gotten help from dreams include this 14th century turtle boat, which was the first armored battleship seen by its creator, the Korean admiral, in a dream. And they range on up to the present. This is my friend Paul Horowitz here at Harvard, designed the first laser telescope. And at a time when all known chemical structures were some sort of straight line with side chains, August Kekule dreamed that the structure of benzene was a closed ring. Dmitri Mendeleev dreamed his final version of the periodic table of the elements. And Otto Lowy won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for an experiment he dreamed that demonstrated the chemical nature of nerve conduction. Basically, on a frog that was cut open but alive, he stimulated the vagus nerve, which made the heart slow down, removed a fluid sample from around it, pipetted that onto another frog's heart, and the second frog's heart slowed down also. proving that it's not just an electrical impulse, but that some chemical in the fluid is influencing it. And that's what he won the Nobel Prize for. And these problem-solving dreams happen even more often in cultures which advocate looking to one's dreams. Srinivasa Ramanujan, India's greatest mathematician, said that all of his mathematical proofs came in dreams. And Gandhi dreamed his nonviolent resistance movement against British rule. And so far I've been talking about spontaneous occurrences. However, I've done prospective research looking at how often people can solve problems in their dreams. And in this study, college students selected a problem which they needed to solve. Some of them were homework problems, and carried out bedtime dream incubation for 1 week. As rated by the dreamers, 1/2 recalled a dream related to the problem and 1/3 dreamed a solution to it. Blind judges rated barely more as on topic and 1/4 as having dreams that solved the problem. There were a few of the most metaphoric ones that the dreamers said solved it, and the judges didn't see that. So in both the studies and the anecdotes, any type of problem is occasionally solved in a dream, but 2 areas are most likely. Those that require thinking outside the box when conventional wisdom is wrong, and those that benefit from vivid visualization. This corresponds very much with what we know about brain activity during dreaming. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, just behind our foreheads, is damped down, so we're not censoring. And that's not just in the Freudian sense, but we also stop thinking, no, that's not what the right way to do that, sort of professionally censoring. And also, the secondary visual cortex is more active than when we're awake. And that's where our visual imagination lies. So the take-home message is that dreams can occasionally solve any sort of problem. They're especially likely to solve ones that benefit from visualization or require thinking outside the box, and also that dream incubation increases problem-solving dreams. Now, these are the incubation instructions that I used in my experiment and that I often use in workshops. And you don't have to take notes on these because I gave them to Claire and they're going to be posted on the website. But I want to go over them a bit because they may be what some questions are about. So you write down the problem as a brief phrase or sentence. Keep it short. Our dreaming minds are not super verbal. Review the problem for a few minutes before going to bed. Once in bed, visualize the problem as a concrete image if it lends itself to that. And if you're a good visualizer, just hold it in your mind's eye as you're drifting off. If you're not a good visualizer, you can arrange objects connected to the problem on your night table or just a photograph that suggests the problem to be the last thing as you fall asleep. And tell yourself you want to dream about that problem as you're falling asleep. And then keep a pen and paper by the bed. They make little flashlights with pen lights, but also now many people use the voice function on their smartphone as the way to keep a dream journal. And upon awakening, lie quietly before you get out of bed. Note if there's any trace of a recalled dream, and if so, just kind of stay with the emotion or the person you were thinking about, and sometimes a whole dream floods back. Write it down, and definitely don't jump up and turn your attention to anything else because dream recall is very fragile, and there are so many people who recall waking up and going, oh, that was such a vivid dream, I won't forget that one, and then they remembered nothing other than that waking thought about it. And there's a lot more about that in my book, The Committee of Sleep, but also there will be those incubation instructions you just saw on the website for the symposium. So, questions on the first section?
Hi, Deirdre. So looking over the questions, and actually I just wanted to make a note for people who may have joined us a little bit late or didn't hear, the way to ask questions or make comments is to do so in the Q&A. I noticed a few people raised hands, but I would ask you to go to the Q&A and ask your questions there. So Nancy asked a question, what does it mean if you never remember your dreams?
People's dream recall varies quite a bit from people who say that they haven't recalled a dream in several years. I've occasionally heard ever in their life, but most people will say, well, yeah, back in childhood they did, on up to people who remember 5 long dreams a night, which is probably as many periods of dreaming as we're having. So there's some things that correlate with that. There's some personality characteristics. Being more introverted correlates with dream recall. Being more psychologically minded. Artists tend to remember more of their dreams. Being more extroverted and practical and focused on the external world tends to correlate with less dream recall. But then a big correlate is just how long you sleep. The longer you sleep, the more dream recall you have, and it's not just proportional. Each of our dream periods through the night gets longer and denser in the sense of there's something called REM density, which is our eye movements happening then, but also it just seems to be when we have our most vivid dreams is late in the night. So if you cut off part of your 8 hours of sleep, you're not losing a little bit of dream time, you're losing a lot of it. So they're both physical reasons and psychological reasons. And the normal range of human beings is, like I say, everything from no dream recall to 5 big ones a night.
Sandy asks a question about problems and solving problems through dreams. Basically, she's saying, does the size or the complexity of the problem affect that, and how much you in your waking hours are preoccupied with that problem?
Certainly working and focusing on it by day is a big piece of it. In fact, people usually give the problem to their dream because they're stuck on it, not because they haven't thought of trying it yet, except in my experiment when I ask my subjects not to work on it by day. But in general, it's helpful to be focusing on it, you know, to have all the background learning, to be very interested in, to have grappled with this problem. And then often our waking mind gets stuck because we have some misconception going on in what the conventional wisdom is for an objective problem. But for personal problems, we just have habitual characterologic ways of approaching things that where we kind of keep doing the same not productive thing in a relationship over and over and over. And our dreaming mind just thinks outside the box on those. But the simpler the problem is, the better. The more it can be visualized, the better. But the more you've worked on it by day, the more likely it is to get into your dream.
Susie has asked about neuroimaging tools and dreams. Have you done any work with any neuroimaging tools?
No, I just study dream content. As editor of the journal Dreaming, I have to know about those things because we publish a lot of neuroimaging of rapid eye movement sleep, and I've taught graduate courses that are kind of everything about sleep and dreams. So I can answer more detailed questions about that, but personally, no, I don't use the EEG equipment in sleep labs. I'm about to do one study that has a little home monitoring device that detects sleep onset hypnagogia, just because I'm interested in looking at inducing self-awareness during that so that people might be able to problem solve more easily or induce lucidity during that state.
Well, Dale had something that he wanted to share, and that was, you know, he has had experiences where he's been thinking about a problem a lot, going to bed, but then when he gets up first thing in the morning, goes for a long run, oftentimes the solution comes during the run. And he hadn't put the two together, but I guess what we're wondering is it synergistic, the sleeping on it and then taking the run, and maybe that, I don't know, rush of oxygen to your brain or that activity revs up the brain to help you solve that problem?
Well, I've heard two things related to that. One is that when I was asking people for the Committee of Sleep book about whether they'd ever solved a problem in a dream, lots of people would say yes, but other people would say, well, no, but sometimes I just wake up knowing the solution. And I think some of those are sleep doing something else restorative that makes us able to realize something. But some of those may be lost dreams, because I found a few examples where somebody had dreamed about something. They woke up just knowing the solution, and as they went to actually carry it out, they had this odd deja vu of, oh my God, I knew it because I did this in my dream. So that's one phenomena that relates a little bit to his sense that this happens more in the morning. But also when I give this talk on problem-solving dream various places, a lot of people tell me that very physically vigorous but quite repetitive activities that get their cardiovascular system really revved up but don't take much attention the way playing basketball or something would. I've heard running some, I've heard swimming even more, cycling. There seems to be something that may or may not have that much to do with dreaming, about being very physiologically aroused but not having to pay a lot of attention to the activity. Because I've heard that from people who don't necessarily run in the morning.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was about the author's idea for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And when I think about my dreams and the type of person I am in my dreams, or the type of dreams I have, and the type of person I am during the day, it is a little Jekyll and Hyde in itself. I'm, really mystified as to why my dreams are so cryptic.
Well, I think it's because our brain is in such a different biochemical and electrical activation state, and our verbal areas are kind of damped down. They're not completely shut off. Same for our logical linear reasoning. That's why most of the time we don't even ask ourselves if we might be dreaming. Even when kind of bizarre things are happening, we just take them for granted and assume we're awake, because this prefrontal area behind our forehead is not fully active. So I think we're thinking about all the same things, but it's just this very, very different state of consciousness that hallucinates easily, it's more emotional, more intuitive, but doesn't do linear logic very much.
Well, speaking of illogical, what I don't understand is, in some dreams I could fly, in other dreams I can't run, and I can't even yell if I needed to. I don't quite understand why in some dreams there are boundaries and some dreams there are no boundaries.
Well, during rapid eye movement sleep, when most of our dreams are occurring, we're actually paralyzed. There's an area in our brain that's sending out a don't move, don't move, don't move signal, because our motor cortex is actually very active because we think we're doing all these things in the dream. And so if we didn't have that paralysis, we would be acting out our dreams all the time. And there's a rare disorder where that area gets damaged and people do act out their dreams. That's much worse than regular sleepwalking for potentially injuring people. So it seems that sometimes we are a little bit aware that our body is really paralyzed, even when we're basically dreaming. There's also another state called sleep paralysis, where we wake up and we're paralyzed for just a moment after we wake up. Not everyone has that, but it's a fairly common experience to have occasionally. But also just feeling paralyzed in one's dream is probably just sensing your real body a little better than you do in some other dreams.
Do we have time for any more questions for this section?
We should probably move on if we want to get to everything.
Okay. Because one of the things I'm seeing a lot is people are asking about good dreams and bad dreams. And I know you're getting ready to go into that section. So you might be able to answer some people's questions in the material you're going to go into.
Yeah, exactly. So wait, am I still in my slideshow?
Yes. So,
okay, I never came back on screen. Sorry. I meant to have my face there while I was answering questions, but it does make this part easier.
okay.
So, in terms of trauma and dreams, people who experience any kind of major trauma tend to have nightmares about the trauma while it's happening and shortly after. And that's not post-traumatic stress disorder. That's just a really normal response to trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder is when the trauma's passed, when the threat is no longer there, when it's a little bit in the past. Some people naturally stop dreaming about the trauma, while others will continue to have recurring dreams about the awful thing that happened to them over and over, and they pretty much all describe it as just as if they're being re-traumatized every night, as if a rape was happening every night, or if their house was burning down every night, or they were back in a war every night. War veterans are definitely the most studied of the groups with post-traumatic stress disorder. In a study Bessel van der Kolk and Ernest Hartman did on Vietnam vets, they found a rate of 70% having signs of post-traumatic stress disorder in an outpatient population. In their study, they found the strongest predictors for who had the worst PTSD were a younger age at enlistment and losing a buddy in combat. But subsequent studies have found that a childhood history of trauma or a major loss in childhood are also at least as important. And they found a pattern that's held up across many other samples of other kinds of trauma, which is early on they would have very realistic reenactments. And then over time, they would tend to get a little bit more dreamlike quality, but still not be as dreamlike as other dreams. And sometimes they just had bizarre things interspersed with the real event, and other times something that almost happened in waking life would the worst thing they could imagine would actually go ahead and happen in the dream. And one example from one of their dreams was of a young man who in reality had been in a bad battle in the middle of the night, and made it back to his tent to sleep. And in the morning, lots of his regiment was dead, and he was asked to come into this tent where they had body bags with all his fellow soldiers who'd been killed. And they unzipped one to have him identify it. And in reality, it was unzipped and he saw his best friend. But in the nightmare he kept having, the body bag was unzipped and he saw himself lying in it. So the dreams can be pretty close to the event, but do dreamy things with it. I also had the opportunity to teach a course on treating trauma in Kuwait right after the first Gulf War. And I took advantage of being there to collect dreams from Kuwaitis that they'd had during the occupation and that they were having after the occupation. And they followed very similar patterns. One dreamer had a brother who'd been fighting in the resistance, and at one point in real life, the Iraqis had burst into their house and held a gun to each person's head one by one, saying they were going to shoot them if they didn't say where the cousin was, and they didn't know where the cousin was. But in reality, after doing this for a while, the soldiers just left. And in the dream she had, the soldiers would burst in, they would hold the gun to each family member's head, demanding to know where the cousin was. And then when they got last to her youngest son, they would hold the gun to his head and they would shoot him in the dream, which was kind of what she was most afraid of in waking life. Others had nightmares that were more metaphoric representations of the occupation. One had a recurring dream throughout the occupation that she was riding in an elevator, and the elevator lurched to a stop, and she realized that the main support for it had broken and that it was hanging by just a thread and about to crash down many stories and kill them any moment. And she would wake up in terror. And she dreamed that over and over during the occupation. And then a couple months after the occupation, she had, the nightmare had been continuing, and she had a version of it where it started like it always did. They're hanging by a thread, and then rescuers came and opened up a little panel in the top of the elevator and helped everyone out of the elevator to safety. And she said they were Americans, no less. So they very much represented the liberators after the occupation. There was a boy who was 7 years old who dreamed during the occupation that Saddam Hussein was chasing him down a street with a knife trying to kill him, and he'd wake up screaming. And after the occupation, he would dream that he and his father and sometimes some other Kuwaiti men would come upon Saddam, and they would chase him down with knives and kill him. I also collected dreams after 9/11, and they also had a lot of realistic replays of the worst moments. One man who worked from the World Trade Center described his recurring nightmare simply as just an image from waking life, looking back and seeing the building coming down. Many dreamers found the doomed World Trade Center occupants jumping or falling from windows to be the most horrifying image, and this replayed in their nightmares over and over, sometimes realistically watching as they had, other times forced by the flames to jump themselves. But after many repetitions, some of them began to spontaneously change that dream into something positive. A couple of dreamers began to equip people with parachutes that they sailed down on, and in a more fanciful version, one of them had someone there handing out Mary Poppins style umbrellas that they could float down on. And my favorite example of a nightmare turning into a mastery dream was from Daniel O'Brien, who was the air traffic controller who guided Flight 77. That morning, it was the one that left Dulles and also eventually crashed into the Pentagon. And so she had watched it take off normally on her radar screen. Then she'd watched it veer off course before it disappeared off her radar screen. Then she knew that it was not making contact with anyone as she saw it come back into her airspace on the screen, and actually headed toward the White House and then veered and headed to the Pentagon as she was watching all of this helplessly. And so her nightmare was just of what this plane was doing, but as seen on her glowing radar screen over and over. But eventually, weeks into having this nightmare, one night it started like that, and then as it came back in the airspace and she knew it was going to head for the Pentagon, she just reached into the radar screen, which in the dream was a kind of glowing mass of gel, and picked the little plane out of it and sort of cradled it in her hand so that it couldn't do any harm. And she woke up kind of feeling healed and like the experience was finally behind her. It carried over in a similar way to how the nightmare had kept re-traumatizing her. So I want to talk a little bit about treatment for PTSD nightmares. In a book I edited, 5 different chapter authors had all come up with the idea from hearing all these people who spontaneously have mastery dreams after a while, that maybe we could speed up that process. So people had developed slightly different versions of this technique, but they all had to do with telling people that other people sometimes had mastery dreams, and that bedtime incubation can influence your dreams, and having them come up with a scenario that they would like the nightmare to take if the nightmare recurred. And some people immediately know, oh, I'd like X to happen, and you just help them flesh out the detail. Others don't quite know what you mean at first, and you try to be as non-leading as possible to give them all kinds of, well, someone could come and rescue you, or you could get yourself out of this situation, or maybe because it's a dream, you'd like to shrink the fire or the attacker down to be 1 inch high, or see them being shot off into space. You give some realistic and magical and some kind of self-efficacy, and other people achieves it. And so in this book, we were all describing these sorts of interventions with different trauma populations that we'd come to kind of separately. And later, Barry Krakow systematized this into a 3-session group format where he instructed people on doing this and did some very controlled research that proved that it was quite effective in getting rid of the nightmares. Populations I've worked with have included more women with a history of sexual abuse than any other kind of trauma group. And they sometimes want to fight off their abuser or have someone rescue them, but they distinctively are especially likely to simply want to tell off the abuser, and the abuser has to sit there and listen and understand why this was bad, is a very common one for them. And then this is a drawing by a child who was having recurring nightmares about the World Trade Center jumpers. And when she scripted a dream, she wanted to have Superman stop the plane from going into the World Trade Center in the first place. So this time I'm going to pull myself out of the screen for the Q&A. And I assume we have more questions now, or even the ones from before. You said we're starting to be about bad dreams.
Yes, and before we get there, there was a question that came in about social dreaming from Leslie. Do you know what she's talking about when she's talking about social dreaming?
Well, what's the question about it? Yes, I do.
Do you practice social dreaming? And would you say answer if you do, and then what it is?
Well, social dreaming refers to groups getting together and trying to incubate dreams that are more for society. I mean, sometimes they're for a smaller local group purpose, but often they're about saving the environment, or there probably are people doing it about solutions to the pandemic. But it's dream incubation and then dream sharing and dream work, but with the group as the goal. And actually, no, I mean, I've read about it when I'm at the International Association for the Study of Dreams. There's some other people leading workshops on that, so I've been in it and participated in it, but no, it's not actually something that I do or research myself.
A couple of questions have come in around the idea of the imagery in dreams. One person specifically asking about the imagery of water in dreams, but I guess there's some other common imagery that happens as well. Is there a significance, for instance, to dreaming about bodies of water, rivers, lakes, oceans in dreams?
Even though if you go to a dream dictionary or something, it will say water represents our unconscious. Really, the way that most responsible dream psychologists work with dreams is not to tell you what we think, you know, a symbol means and give you our associations to it, or even to give you common universal ones, but to draw out your personal association. So if I was working with a dream that had water in it from someone, I would say, tell me about water. Just pretend I'm from Mars and don't know what water is. What is water? And listen for metaphors that came out. And one person would say, it's life-giving, it sustains you, plants need it, it's, you know, it's this life-giving force. And the next person will say, you could drown in it. I almost did drown as a child. You can just get associations in very opposite directions to almost any symbol that you can just state as a word or phrase like that. So you're trying to get at the person's metaphor. So the person that thinks water is life-giving, you would begin to see what role the water was playing in the dream and what in their life are they seeking that thing and don't have it, or are they happy that they have all this life-giving water? And for the person that's afraid of drowning in it, you would start exploring what in their waking life feels like they might be about to drown again.
Neil asked a question about dreaming and restful sleep. The question is essentially, can you have restful sleep when you're having really active dreams?
Lots of people will describe their dreams feeling like they disturb their sleep, but the real correlation is that we don't remember our dreams unless we wake up straight from them. If even the woman who was asking about never recalling dreams, if she went into a sleep lab and they awakened her a few minutes into each period of rapid eye movement sleep, she would probably recall 5 dreams a night. She's probably never waking up out of the stage of sleep that she's dreaming in. And also potentially sleeping shorter and not getting as much. Things that wake you up a lot, they don't give you more dreams, but they make you remember your dreams more, so you feel like you're dreaming more. And obviously they're associated with a certain amount of sleep disturbance and having to go back to sleep. So the two go together in that way. It's usually either an internal body thing that's waking you up or an external sound thing that's waking you up, but you'll recall more dreams and you won't be getting as continuous sleep.
You had mentioned earlier about a soldier seeing himself dead in a sleeping bag. And this sparked a number of questions around dying in dreams. I think a lot of people believe you can't die in a dream. Is that valid, or can you certainly die in a dream?
You can die in a dream. It's much less common than almost dying. Almost dying and waking up just before you're going to die is a very common dream experience. But I did a study once asking people if they'd ever had a dream in which they actually died. And not a majority, but some people said yes and recounted such dreams. And about half of them seemed to just experience dying and what dying was like, and the other half died and then went on to a sort of afterlife part of the dream. And unlike the dreams where you almost die, which are usually anywhere from anxious to terrifying, the dreams where you actually die had more positive dreams than not. I mean, a few of them were very unpleasant or nightmarish or sad, but the majority of them were dying felt good, even if it stopped at the dying, or they went on to some positive afterlife thing that maybe represented some sort of rebirth or, you know, death of something that they wanted to die off.
Well, Andrew has a question about a dream that he has periodically about a friend, and these are periodically, I mean, separated by many years. He has a friend who died, a friend from high school who died violently. And he said every 7 years or so, he has a dream about this friend. And I guess recently he was talking to him in his dream as though the friend hadn't died. And he was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, people have a lot of dreams about people who've passed on, and they're usually right after the person's died. They're rather distressed dreams about the death. Death is happening all over again in the dream, like with the other traumas. And over time, more people move on to dreams that are happy about the person. They'll just be visiting with them, either unaware that they've died or aware that they've died, but aware they have some sort of blessed state where they get to see them again. Sometimes departed loved ones become a recurring theme of someone who comes back and gives advice. But an ongoing bad dream about someone tends to indicate there's something less resolved about the grief process there. And I would think, a friend from school that died early on would have been more of a shock and something that you were processing from a sort of younger age point of view.
I understand your next segment, we're going to get a little bit more specific about the situation we all find ourselves in right now, which is, for most of us, staying at home during this time of pandemic.
Yes, so I will switch back to my screen. And I've been doing a survey on dreams about the pandemic, and I've collected about 6,000 dreams from about 2,600 dreamers so far, and all over the world. And I'm noticing patterns of sort of clusters in the content of what people are dreaming about, which is starting to change a bit over time. One big cluster is a fairly literal dream about getting the virus. Some of them are completely literal. The person is having trouble breathing, or they are spiking a fever. But some are a little bit dreamlike. One woman looks down at her stomach and sees that it has blue stripes on it. And in the dream, she remembers that blue stripes are the first sign of the COVID-19 virus. But in all of these, the person is suspecting or sure that they have just caught it and very anxious about their survival. Then they're metaphors for the virus, but the biggest sort of subset of these are bugs. And I did not see bug dreams after 9/11. I saw many of the other same metaphors that I'm seeing now. But I've just seen dozens and dozens of every kind of flying insect in the world coming at the dreamer, swarms of cockroaches coming at them, masses of wriggling worms. There were some grasshoppers with fangs. So bugs are really, really a powerful metaphor for this. And I think it's partly just the almost pun that we say I've got a bug to mean I have a virus. So that's probably part of it. Dreams do like puns. But secondly, and kind of deeper, I think that lots and lots of little things that cumulatively could harm or kill us is a pretty good metaphor for the virus particles. And I think that we're seeing more metaphors in general for the virus than I did after 9/11, because it doesn't have an inherent one obvious visual image. After 9/11, there were tsunamis coming at people and other things, but the buildings coming down, the planes crashing into them, we really had a visualization. But for this one, in addition to the bugs, just about every natural disaster that can strike stands in for the virus, bad people shooting in the streets. And I think it's because if our dreams are so visual that when we don't have one strong visual image, but we're feeling fear about something, that our dreaming mind wants to latch on to an image or a concrete specific that would go with that amount of fear. This is metaphoric dream I had early in the pandemic. I was inside a kind of ancient house. I was actually in a pretty library with the windows closed, but I knew that outside there was something horrible going on that was kind of like the Black Death period in Europe when the plague was happening. It felt like about that period of time. And I didn't actually see the outside, but when I woke up, it didn't make sense to make the library that had nothing to do with the dominant feeling in the dream. So I made this image of a Black Plague era plague doctor wandering through a landscape of the COVID particles. And another cluster that's kind of unique to this one is invisible monsters. In other disasters, I see monsters sometimes as the stand-in for whatever's happened. But in this one, we have a lot of invisible monsters. And sometimes the dreamer is somewhere where they're seeing these slight shadows. They can't see the monster, but they sort of see movement or shadows from it. There's one where a dreamer sees other people one by one are being knocked to the ground and suffering these terrible injuries and dying, but she can't see the thing that's knocking them down to the ground and killing them. So I think this invisible menace gets represented as invisible monsters, which just like, it's less common than the bugs, but it's also unique to this disaster. Then there are lots of safe distancing, practice and reminder. Just like when we're learning any new skill, we dream about it a lot. This is a more anxious learning, but I think that's part of why there's so many dreams where the dreamer's out in public and realizes they've forgotten their mask, or they're standing too close, or opposite, they have their mask on, other people are ignoring the rules and getting close to them and coughing on them, but the dream is just reminding you you're supposed to be doing that. It's necessary over and over. This was my safe distancing dream. I dreamed that I was putting a hood on my cat so that he wouldn't breathe something toxic in the air, and we had to go out into this air, and he was fighting me about, he didn't know it was for his own good that I was trying to put this hood on him. And so through most of the dream, I felt like this was going to be a disaster. I wasn't going to be able to save him from what was in the air, but I finally got the hood on him. And it wasn't like a great mastery dream where I felt wonderful, but it was kind of like, okay, now maybe we're going to be all right, was the feeling. And I was looking for either an image of a cat in a gas mask or a gas mask that I could put over an image of my cat. But I found this lamb that was just my cat's size and being held just like I was holding the cat at the end of the dream. So I made this lamb being carried through a landscape of the COVID-19 particles. And then there are various mastery dreams already showing up. I imagine we'll see more later, but a few people who get the virus in their dream kind of immediately know that they're strong and they're going to get over this, and they dream about recovering. Others find a magic elixir in their house to drink. Others go and find a physician who gives them a shot or a pill. Or others who don't even have the virus dream of cures. There's something in cat saliva that will cure the virus. Leeches will draw it out of your body. One guy dreams that his dog can sniff and detect it. And interestingly, several days after I heard that dream, I saw an article on someone who was training dogs to sniff out COVID the way they have been trained for a while to sniff cancer and diabetes. And my very favorite of the mastery dreams was a woman that dreamed that she turned herself into a giant antibody and had this superhuman strength and went rampaging around killing all the virus she could find, and woke up feeling very empowered by that. So the last thing I want to say about the COVID dreams is that although I definitely encourage people to work with their dreams and interpret their dreams, if you're just having a lot of repetitive anxiety dreams that you wish to have fewer of, the most effective thing is to choose what kind of dream you would like to have. Like to think of a favorite person you'd like to see in your dream, or a place you'd like to go after the pandemic is over, or lots of people like flying dreams. So pick out a dream, and very much like in the problem-solving incubation, just form a phrase, form a visual image of it, or put a picture on your night table that represents it. And last thing, as you're falling asleep, you want to be telling yourself, tonight I want to dream about, and think of your happy topic. And that both makes it likelier you'll dream about that content, and less likely that you'll have more of the recurring anxiety dreams. So we are now at our last Q&A.
Well, a few people have asked questions around the topic of hypnosis and dreams. So Meredith mentioned that she's a psychologist and she's worked with people who have PTSD, especially people who were abused as children. And she's used hypnotherapy to unlock the events behind recurrent nightmares, and then to later overcome the trauma. For example, having the adult patient take the child patient by the hand inside the dream and push the abuser out a window. So can you address the use of hypnosis in that regard?
Yes, I think that hypnosis can be used to uncover some memories which people have lost track of. When I had a private practice, I used to do some of that work. More with people with dissociative disorders are the ones who forget their traumas. Most people with post-traumatic stress disorder have the opposite problem, that they're having intrusive flashbacks by day as well as the intrusive nightmares about it. But with dissociative disordered people, I did some hypnosis to help remember things that had happened, and sometimes imagery to try to resolve that. But with the people with post-traumatic stress disorder, if you're trained in hypnosis, you can definitely use it, especially in relation to the mastery dreams that I was talking about. And in fact, in that book, Trauma and Dreams, when I was saying that five of us had sort of come up with the idea of engineering mastery dreams because some happen spontaneously, at least 2 of those people, including myself, had done some of the inducing the mastery dreams in a hypnotic trance, which, if anything, just makes it a little bit more powerful and real, an image that's even likelier to carry over into sleep. So if you're trained in hypnotherapy, you certainly can use it to do the imagery for treating PTSD in general and for inducing the dreams, but you can also do them in a sort of a no formal trance induction guided imagery fashion also.
You mentioned the term mastery dreams. Is that the same thing as lucid dreaming, or is lucid dreaming something different?
No, the mastery dreams refer to an alternate script for a recurring bad dream, whether it happens spontaneously, like in the air traffic controller reaching into the screen, or whether it's one that we coach our patients on. Would you like someone to rescue you, or would you rather fight your way out of this, or would you rather shrink things down? Those are the mastery dreams. Lucid dreams are dreams where you know you're dreaming while you're dreaming, and you can often then alter the content of the dream, but that's not automatic. Some people know they're dreaming, and yet the dream still carries on the same story that it would have otherwise. Or a few people can just barely occasionally change things, but not often. And other people can just completely reform the imagery of what's around them and who they're with and everything once they realize they're dreaming. And many people think that lucid dreams would be the obvious way to change your nightmares, or have a problem-solving dream. You can just run around asking dream characters the answer to it, or to change your dreams in any way you'd like. And that is true for the tiny proportion of the population that easily have lucid dreams on demand when they want. But incubating lucidity in your dreams is actually a much harder goal than simply incubating for some other content to show up. You don't have to realize you're dreaming and then tell yourself, yeah, and I was going to dream about my favorite person that I want to see tonight. It's much easier to focus on wanting to dream about the person and have that dream without lucidity. So I think lucid dreams are just a great, wonderful state of consciousness in and of themselves, but a kind of simple, straightforward incubation of content is easier and faster and more effective for most people if you're trying to use the lucidity for some other purpose.
Dr. Barrett, this has been fascinating. It's now 7 o'clock. The hour flew by, and we only got to a fraction of the questions. So I apologize to everybody out there who didn't get their question answered. The sheet that shows you how to basically work on a problem solving is on our website, and this video will also appear on our website. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, especially Dr. Barrett. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and sharing that with the Vail community.
And thank you everyone for all the interesting questions and comments.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much and have a great night. Goodbye.
Bye.